Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. As you can see, I have lots of beautiful seedlings growing behind me on this grow shelf. These plants are doing really well, but the other day I found something that was a little bit concerning to me. I was looking at the soil very carefully, as one does when one is growing seedlings, and I saw a fungus gnat larva. Now, if you have grown indoor seedlings in the past, fungus gnats may be something that you've struggled with. They're definitely something that have plagued me from time to time in the past. Fungus gnats are those little tiny bugs that fly around. They're about the size of fruit flies, but you've probably noticed them hovering around your plants. Now, you can get fungus gnats in lots of different ways. Honestly, it's not something that is completely 100% avoidable. There was one year when I purchased seed starting mix that was infested with fungus gnat eggs. Once I added water to it and planted my seedlings, I had an instant fungus gnat infestation, and that was really troubling. Now, since then, I make my own potting soil. I haven't had a significant fungus gnat issue like that again, but every year at some point I do tend to have a few flies, a few of those little fungus gnats flying around. And it's the kind of thing where if you let it go unaddressed, they can really quickly multiply, especially inside your house. They don't have any of the natural predators or controls that they would have outside. So in your house, they can just grow out of control really quickly. So fungus gnats outside in their natural environment will mostly feed on funguses and decaying plant matter in the soil. The problem is when you get them inside and you end up with a big overpopulation of fungus gnats, they can run out of their normal food and then they turn to the tender roots of your little seedlings. I have had plants damaged by fungus gnats in the past, so that is obviously something that I want to avoid. Now, I have not seen any adult fungus gnats this year. I've only seen, as I mentioned, that one larva in the soil. So it is much easier to control fungus gnats if you start off right away before it has time to develop into a significant problem. So as soon as I saw that one larva, I said, all right, it's time to jump into action and make sure that this doesn't turn into an actual problem. Now, throughout the years of growing seedlings inside, I've tried many different fungus gnat controls. If you look on the internet, you'll find all different kinds of stuff recommended. One of the common ways you can control fungus gnats, I don't think you can completely eliminate them, but you can reduce their numbers, is by not overwatering your plants. Fungus gnats like to live in the top, maybe inch or two of soil. And if you keep that soil continuously moist, then it's a perfect breeding ground for them. If you let the little bit of soil on the top of your plants dry out a little bit, you'll find that you'll have less of a fungus gnat issue. Honestly, that is not the solution that worked best for me. I do try it and I do think that it helps, but it has never completely managed to eradicate fungus gnats for me. Some people will also recommend topping your seedlings with a little bit of sand on top. That is supposed to provide the same type of control. It provides an environment on the top of the soil which the fungus gnats do not like to grow in and will keep their numbers from just becoming too numerous. That's something that honestly I just prefer the low maintenance method. For me, that wasn't really something that was going to work with my gardening style. If that works for you, then that is great. I've heard various other recommendations. I've tried some of them. While they have worked to some extent, the thing that has worked the best for me is these mosquito bits. Now, this is, obviously marketed as a mosquito control product. Basically, this is approved for organic gardening. Basically, what it does is it is a type of bacteria. So you can see these little bits here. Within these bits is contained this type of bacteria. If you have been gardening for a while and you've ever sprayed BT on your plants, this is a different strain of that same bacteria. So what it does is it is toxic to some larval forms of insects, but it is non-toxic to humans, fish, mammals. So this is a great option when it comes to fungus gnat control. Even though, as I said, it is marketed for mosquitoes, it also works great for fungus gnat larvae. What this will not do is kill your fungus gnat adults. I have personally found that the adults don't really seem to themselves cause any problems with my plants. They're a nuisance. And obviously the main issue is that they lay eggs, which will lead to more larvae, which will then damage your plants. But I have found that if you're able to control the larvae, obviously that will in turn control your adult population. One other thing that you can do if you want to control the adults specifically is to get those little yellow sticky traps and just stick them in your plants, and that will trap the adults. I have found that those traps alone for me anyway, have not been effective at substantially controlling the fungus gnat population. I found that what you really want to do is control the larvae. Now, if you want to use those yellow traps in addition to this, that's great. You know, that would work even faster, more effectively. As I said, this year I haven't seen any adults. I've only seen the larvae. So I am going to use this as a control to hopefully completely knock the problem down before it actually turns into a real problem. Now, if you read the back of this bag here, it actually does give information for fungus gnat control. Even though, as I said, it's marketed for mosquitoes, they do have directions for how to use it to control fungus gnat larvae as well. I am going to slightly deviate from those directions. What they recommend doing is to take about, let's see the amount they use. They recommend 4 tablespoons of mosquito bits soaked in 1 gallon of water for 30 minutes, and then you're basically going to water your plants with that water. The 30-minute soaking time allows the bacteria time to kind of wake up and to permeate the water. Then when you water your plants with them, it's going to soak the soil. The fungus gnats will eat those and ultimately die. So what I am going to do is I am going to up the concentration of these granules that I'm using in the water. Because as you can see behind me, you can probably only see about half of my plants in this video frame here. But I have lots of seedlings here, and I don't want to be soaking gallons and gallons of water. So what I usually do is, honestly, I don't really measure. I'm going to probably about double the concentration. And then when I pour it into the trays that have my plants in them, I'm going to add a little bit of water to thin it out. So that's what works for me. If you have a small amount of seedlings or you just want to really carefully follow the directions on the package, then go ahead and do that also. One other thing to note is, as I mentioned, fungus gnat larvae do tend to live in the top couple inches of soil. So while I normally bottom water my seedlings, for this purpose, you may want to consider top watering, especially if you have a really bad infestation of fungus gnats. Because I am planning to start with a higher concentration of these mosquito bits in the water and then add some more water to basically thin it out, I'm still going to bottom water for my trays just because that's easier for me. My plants should soak it up enough that it will still get to the top layer. There have been times in the past, that one year when I had the really bad infestation, I did water the top of the soil because you want it to get to the fungus gnats right away. If you are using the bottom watering method like I am, you want to make sure that you give enough water that the plant roots and the soil can soak it up enough that it will reach to the top of the soil because, as I said, that's where the fungus gnats live. So I have a couple half-gallon pitchers here. I'm going to go ahead and get some of these mosquito bits soaking in these pitchers, and then I will meet you back here and we will go ahead and treat our plants. So it's been a little over 30 minutes. Our mosquito bits have been soaking. I'm just going to strain them into this container here. I'll fill this about half full with this liquid and then fill it the rest of the way with plain water. As I mentioned, we were going to dilute it. I like to use this container just because it's got that little spout, makes it a little bit easier to control where the water goes. So this has become my designated plant watering container. Now, one thing to note is that this treatment will kill fungus gnat larvae that are currently in the soil. But depending on where in the life cycle your fungus gnats are, you probably will need to do this treatment a couple times, about once a week or so, because this is not going to kill adult fungus gnats, and it's also not going to kill eggs that are in the soil. So if you do this about once a week or so, you should eventually be able to get all the fungus gnats and hopefully completely eradicate the fungus gnats in your house. If not, you'll definitely be able to knock down their numbers quite a bit. I'm just going to carefully pour this into each tray that has my plants in it. So as I said, this is really easy. I mean, I'd have to be watering these plants anyway, so I just have to go through the little extra step of soaking the mosquito bits in the water before watering. One other trick that I've used in the past, also using mosquito bits, is at the beginning of the season, I do mix up my own potting soil, although even if you use commercial potting soil, you could still do this. Last season, I did try mixing mosquito bits directly into the potting soil, and while I don't think that was completely foolproof, it definitely did help. I think I went a little bit longer in the season before seeing my first fungus gnat, so I will probably do that again next year, and then at some point in the season, I may have to do this. But overall, this has always worked really well for me, so if you give it a try, I'd love to hear how well it works for you. If you have other tried and true fungus gnat controls, go ahead and leave those in the comments too, because I'm always looking for new ways to do things, and I love to hear what works for you. So thank you so much for hanging out with me by my seedlings today and helping to prevent a fungus gnat infestation. I hope you're having a great day. I hope your gardens and your seedlings are growing well, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.